This is your class on planning and considerations and evaluation. It's mostly based on the book of the title of Anatomy of a Park. Your third homework assignment is based on this. And so do pay attention here, but there's even more detail in the reading. So be sure to get to the reading, which is listed under Bernie Dahl and Donald Mulnar. So let's take a look at these very quickly, just looking at the 8 principles, of which we will then split it up into each one of those and talk about them one at a time. And then most of them have a subset or a subtitle as well. So we're going to look first, taking a look here at everything must have a purpose. And this is just a little bit silly, but that's okay. Here we have a picnic site up in Cottonwood Canyon. And we can take a look at the purposes that each one of these fulfills. So another way to look at this is what would happen if it was not there? What would people have to do instead? So looking here at everything must have a purpose. Here's an arrow. And what is the purpose of this? Here's another one over here. So yes, they're a table. That's the physical object. But the purpose is for people to be able to have a nice clean picnic. So some of these people even brought a picnic cloth, a tablecloth. And it's, you can see, close to the cars, so they don't have to carry stuff very far. Okay, so the purpose of the table is for people to be able to have a good picnic. And looking underneath this arrow, what is the purpose of this? So if you can see it, if you're familiar with the area, this is a boardwalk. So what is the purpose of having a boardwalk? And the main purpose of the boardwalk is to keep people traveling in the same area and keeping them protected. If you look behind you here, or behind the people, those are willows, so you can pretty much assume this is a damp, wet area. And certainly the whole big meadow and over to the Silver Lake is a very wet area. And there used to not be a boardwalk, and the place was just a mud hole. So people would drive their pickup trucks out there and get themselves stuck and dig and shovel and spin their wheels. And it was quite a mud hole. So that helps keep people out of the mud and all organized into an area where they're not causing impact. All right, what is the purpose of this big rock? And you can see that here's the parking area, so it is to contain the parking. So it now blocks the pickup truck from getting out and driving around in the mud and digging it up. And the place is recovering, but if you get up high, you can see old tire tracks down in there that you don't see when you're walking on the boardwalk. So yes, they have their purpose. Looking over here, the purpose of this metal bar, it's a metal pipe that you can be pulled in and out. So if you have the key to the lock that we don't quite see here under the car rack, you can get a vehicle down this road. So its purpose is to be a removable barrier to vehicles. Okay, what's the purpose of this? And yes, this is, it has no purpose. If you know that spoilers were on drag race cars to help hold the tires down, okay. Sorry, if you have a spoiler and you love the spoiler on your car, my apologies. All right, just for fun though. All right, looking up here, what is this sign? It's pretty small. It looks like an information sign, and what it's doing is saying this is a restoration area, so please stay on the boardwalk. So it's an information sign. So if it weren't there, people might be a little more inclined to hop off the boardwalk. They do it enough already. What else is in this picture? Okay, here's a larger sign. We can't see what's on it at all, but you can take a guess as to what that sign is and what its purpose is. And there are more of them around the lake. It's an interpretive sign. So whether this one is talking about a riparian area or moose, or if there's a view out here and it's describing the view, I don't know. It's been replaced by a different sign since this picture was taken. If it weren't there, people wouldn't know as much. And the more people know, the better they connect to an area. And we hope that the more a person connects, the better they're going to take care of it. Okay, a different place altogether. This is City Creek. That's Ensign Peak, and City Creek Canyon is over here. This is the top of B Street going in to the City Creek Nature Preserve. So this is city-owned property. So this is pretty interesting that here is a cover. There are lights. There are parking stalls. There's a gate. There's a trash can. A little teeny piece of lawn being watered. There's a bike rack. But what is this place? It's an odd place. We're going to take a look at it several times. And it's put in by Salt Lake City. These are picnic tables underneath it at this time of year. So what is its purpose? Well, Salt Lake City needed a place over in this corner of the valley near the Capitol, near a hospital, where in the winter they could store their salt for spreading on the roads, creating a slurry and spreading on the roads, so people can get to the hospital and get to the Capitol even in a bad snowstorm. And then they decided to do it aesthetically and put picnic tables under it during the summer. People can get in the shade there. So it has two purposes. We'll come back to that. And two purposes that are compatible because they are different seasons. People aren't picnicking generally in the deep winter when this thing is a big pile of salt under here to spread on the roads. Just a Google shot from above. Here's the pavilion and a drain, and then here's the way in and the way out. So anyway, that's the view from above. The purpose of this, just for fun. So anyway, threw that in. Okay, part of looking at the purpose is the relationship of the park to the surroundings. So how perhaps we can get oriented here. This is the University of Utah football stadium and the big parking lot. The law buildings are over here. Stewart Building is a little hard to pick out right in here. Okay, so here's a park. Cemetery, here's a park. How many of you know what park that is? It's Liberty Park. It's one of the city parks. It's one of the largest. Dahl in particular uses city parks as his examples in the book you'll be reading, but you'll see we can apply these to national parks and even areas that we don't technically call parks, but we call national forests, thinking about picnic areas, trailheads in our national forests out on Bureau of Land Management land. So relationship of this park to its surroundings. These are neighborhoods. So this is all housing. There are not a couple of businesses up here, but not very many. We do have one north-south thoroughfare, 7th East, 6 lanes wide, which is a bit of a problem, both noise, pollution, and you don't want your children playing along that edge with the heavy traffic that's there. So for the most part, it's well placed. It's been there 100 and some odd years before the traffic looked like it does now. So that's just looking at its surroundings. Here's another park. See if you recognize this one. This is Sugar House Park. So looking at the surroundings, this is Highland High School. It's parking, its football field, a practice field, a practice baseball diamond. So the park itself is just this part. There's a commercial business right here, a small restaurant, and a freeway on and off ramp, which is a bit of a problem, right next to a park. So they did put their maintenance buildings near that. This side of the park, so to the west, is all business. So the other 3 sides of the park are residential neighborhoods. So and they've put in an extra light here. So it's pretty easy access. This is a very slow street. This is an interstate. You don't walk in on that side. you don't walk in easily on this side. There are now two lights here, as well as the one at the intersection. So yeah, looking at the surroundings, plenty of people that can walk and bicycle to get here. Comparing it to a national park now, how many of you recognize that? That's not the most common angle that you see it from. In fact, it looks much chubbier when you're over here in Seattle looking at it. So this is Mount Rainier. And then you can see it's surrounded not by national park, but by national forest. And some of this might even be private forest. So the park boundaries are, you can kind of guess from this picture, it's where, oops, here we go, back again. So it's along uh, these outer edges here. So national forest clear cutting, and then the national park, a small protected area, which is, yeah, those aren't as visible when you're down on the highway, which runs up through here. But national forests are very different from national parks. Okay, looking at a new question, the relationship of use areas within the site, both from, yeah, the use areas. So here we are back to Sugar House Park, and we can look at some of the uses in here. One is there's a road, and the road, if you're familiar with it, forces you to leave. You can't keep going around and around and around like you could back when I was in high school. They also cut off this road. This road used to connect here. So of course, people in my high school would try to race around this way and race around this way and cut each other off. So very wise, they cut that off, turned this area into a practice soccer field. Actually, there's room for a couple of teams to work out at once. Other use areas are, these are the play areas with playground equipment for kids. And here's another one. And this one's, the problem with this one, this is a creek running through, and most of the year it's tiny. But spring runoff can be pretty big, so having your children's play area close to the stream can be a bit of a problem. The pavilions, here's a pavilion, a picnic pavilion. This is a, actually, this might be a bathroom. I think this is another picnic pavilion. Here's a baseball diamond. Fortunately, it's facing that way rather than knocking most of your balls out here onto the semis that you can see going by on the freeway. We also have a lake, which is a potential drowning problem for little kids, so it's good that the little kid playground is away from here. This area is a children's playground area, this bottom right-hand corner, with swings and jungle gym and things to play on. And the freeway, it's under this yellow lettering, used to be ground level to that. And in the last 10 years, somebody built up a very big berm, 20-foot high berm, because the potential of vehicles going off the road into that play area existed. It had never happened, but it could have happened. And now there is a 20-foot high berm that runs from about here all the way to this road. So that's blocked off. But that's just looking at use areas within that particular park. Now applying that to a piece of Yellowstone. So this is the south central really part of Yellowstone. And what we have here, this is Yellowstone Lake, and there's gas stations and campgrounds and visitor services here at Fishing Bridge area, and same here at West Thumb. And there's a campground, but no other services here. The road coming up from Jackson comes in through here, and this is Lewis Lake, and there is a campground here. And then the road continues up, loops around, splits, goes to Cody, Wyoming off of this side, and goes up to Old Faithful over here. So let's look at some of the decisions that the park has made looking at use areas within. So small motors are allowed on Lewis Lake. People can fish there. So I don't know if there's a horsepower restriction. There might be under 10 horsepower, something like that. And then this part of Yellowstone Lake, you're allowed pretty big boats in there. You're at 7,000 feet. It's not exactly water ski temperature lake, but pretty big boats are allowed in there. And then there are some non-motor places. So looking here at the fingers on the lower part of Yellowstone Lake, you have a wakeless section, and then you have a non-motor section at the end. So canoers and sea kayakers will hop in this development and paddle along this edge and eventually get up here into the thoroughfare area of Yellowstone, um, and not be competing with motors up at that end. And then the same thing over here. This is where this red motor is above the campground, the red campground, Lewis Lake, and there's the Lewis River in between these two. And the first half of it is just there's no current. It really is just a long finger of the lake. But then the last half of it, there is a little bit of a current, but it's typically mid thigh to mid calf deep. So people will pull their canoes and sea kayaks up here. And then they have this entire Shoshone Lake to give you an idea of scale. It's about 5 miles across this wide end and about 10 miles the whole length of it. Then you have an all non-motorized place to boat. Interesting thing in Yellowstone, none of the rivers are you allowed to boat on them, kayaks or rafts or otherwise, except that little piece of Lewis River right here. So this is the use area to use area is just showing that there are some places in Yellowstone where you can be a muscle powered boat and away from the motor boats because they can be in conflict with each other. Back to Liberty Park, we can look at use areas here. Here we have a lake in the upper right-hand corner, and directly below that, which is to the west, is the Tracy Aviary, the bird sanctuary, with lots of birds on display, and they give interpretive talks about birds in there. We have tennis courts here on the bottom center, and a large play area for kids in the lower left-hand corner with playground equipment in here. And there's a water feature too. And this area, so the top left half, isn't really big enough for like organized sports, but people can play in there. This has a hill on it, getting close to the lake. And then running around the perimeter is a road, and that's where the parking is for the most part. There's a little bit by the tennis courts. And there's a running path, and a rollerblading is really common here. People going around and around jogging or rollerblading. This part too, you can only go around once and then you get kicked out of the park. There's a barricade so that you can't just keep doing loops. This is walking only through the center of the park. So looking at these use areas, how things are separated out. And the main kid play area isn't over here by the water area. Taking a similar look at now in a national park back to Yellowstone. So this is the parking. This is Old Faithful. This Three Sisters Spring is in the Old Faithful area. The geyser itself is pretty much above that S. And we'll pull in a little bit closer. Well, before we pull in closer, here's the main road in. It also has a clover leaf, a lot like an interstate. And then there are roads in and out because this can be extremely congested. This is the parking area, Old Faithful Lodge, and the Snow Lodge. I think this is the one that's open in winter, if I've got my orientation right. And then there are boardwalks that go out among all of the geysers and the springs. So these are boardwalks. They're trails up into a number of places. And then eventually you can go several miles out here and hit the road again and get picked up by a shuttle. And this is what's open in the winter. So you have to hire a vehicle and you have to have set up a reservation to stay here months, like a year in advance. But you can come in here and hike and ski in the winter as well. Pulling in a little bit closer, looking at the use areas, they've put all the parking back and away. It used to be more forward. They've pushed it back. This is the Old Faithful Lodge, the Snow Lodge. And you can see the clusters of people right up here. This is where you sit to watch Old Faithful go off. And mostly people stick to these are gravel walks, not actually boardwalks. But boardwalks do continue on a combination of gravel and boards out there. So here's an area that you can't just come back across. You have to either retreat or go quite a ways out and come back on this set of trails. So uh, especially the idea of moving the parking back has made enjoying the eruption of Old Faithful geyser a lot nicer. And that Old Faithful Lodge is unbelievable. It's 7-story high wood structure. Okay, principle 2 is design must be for people. Um, and yeah, on a hot summer day, this is pretty well designed for people. We're back to Liberty Park, taking a look at it here. It's easy to see in Liberty Park. Here we are out in a natural area. Design must be for people. You'll hear me throughout our classes that I think benches, places for people to sit, are a wonderful thing. The Forest Service doesn't agree with me. They have to maintain them. And I'll even show you that this bench has been vandalized. This is when it was fairly new. But yeah, designs must be for people. Places that you can sit. You can see that there's a cliff edge over there, so the bench is set back a ways, but there's no fence, so it is a little bit iffy. There is a trail that goes all the way out along this top out to the end, and they have fenced in the very end of that. This is an Oregon State Park uh, lookout point. Design must be for people, and we're now back to Big Cottonwood Canyon, and there are numerous benches around Silver Lake, which I think is great. There's now an interpretive sign right here that they take down for the winter snow season. So here we are in autumn. This is back to that bench at Lookout State Park. Uh, you can, yeah, this is not your standard bench. This is a custom made bench for this area. In fact, it's quite lovely. And somebody did steal the back of this bench. This part you can still go sit there, but somebody stole that, and I assume it's in their living room. Shame on them. Okay, so we do want things to be recognizable. People should be able to easily find the garbage. Uh, you might be tempted to hide it, but don't. Um, so garbage cans, signs that are easy to find, employees that are easy to find, drinking fountains that are easy to find. Uh, that's how you design a place for people. So standard versus custom. Yeah, these are the old picnic tables. These are wonderful. This is old, probably Doug fir, 4-inch boards compared to the cheap stuff that's made today, although they probably cost more. But yes, thinking about the function for people, that this is big enough for a big family or a small one to throw lots of stuff on it. Okay, design for people. Again, here we are at Liberty Park looking at the playground area. This is the main children's play area. This was funded with the 2002 Olympic money, uh, sort of profits, but anyway, it's funded from that money. So what are all the fun things that people can do here? What are these things? See these tall silver pipes, and yeah, those are wind chimes, except you go up and thump them. This kid is in the process, so you can see that one is swinging. How about this red pipe? This young gal hanging on to the red pipe here. There's a funnel and a pipe, and it goes underground, and her voice pops up over here with what looks like her sister. So there's another red pipe and a funnel. So these two can talk to each other almost privately that far apart, which is kind of fun for the kids to be able to do. So play is just about fun. I am curious about the memo about how to dress over here. Okay, this is just looking at that area from above. So this is an area very much designed for people, and the people they're designed for are the little kids. Ooh, when you are designing an area, what should you be thinking about? So in the lower left-hand corner, this is Pioneer Park, and all week long, It's mostly a place with lots of shade for homeless people, and that's who's generally there. You can see there that this is Saturday morning. Saturday morning, Salt Lake City brings in a farmer's market. And there's a fair bit of conflict between having a farmer's market and a place that's normally a wonderful shady place for homeless folks. So yeah, there are a couple of policemen there on their bicycles, and it generally goes really well. So fortunately, that is one where looking at the design, or not looking at the design, looking at the uses. If you're planning on putting in a park or putting in a picnic area up in the national forest, if it's a place that's heavily fished, you might not want to disturb the fisher people, and instead move the picnic area to at least 100, 200 feet back from the water. Designed for people watching counts too. So the two people on the left are very deliberately in a busy place. This is up in Vancouver, Washington, both of these. Actually, it's out on Vancouver Island. Victoria is the city here. Um, so they are very deliberately in a place, hoping that you'll toss money their way while they're out juggling and riding that giraffe unicycle. So it is fun to watch people. My daughter always gets after me because I watch people and make up stories about them, and she thinks I should not be paying attention to them, but I do. All right, this is one of the best interpretive events I've ever seen. Right in the middle of a campground, a national park campground in Redwoods National Park and Redwoods State Park, California State Park, somebody noticed artifacts. And so UC Davis got their undergrad students here and they're doing an official dig. Uh, and yeah, the Park Service put a campground here because it's such a lovely place, not too far from the river. And so no surprise that the indigenous Native Americans also camped here. And yeah, you can see they've got that fencing around it. Among the instructions for the student archaeology students, it was to absolutely answer any questions. Whatever you're doing, stop what you're doing if people are asking you questions, but you're really a living interpretive display as well. So pretty cool, well designed for people. People watching and supervising is part of this one, and you can see that dad there on the right supervising very, very closely. As the kids get older, you'll see that the parents aren't hovering quite like that. And in fact, the design of this area, there's the play area under the sun and all that purple pipe. But most of the supervising is done from the tables where the parents and grandparents sit out behind. So the kids are a little more free to play, but you'll see adults in there supervising the younger kids too. This is Timpanogos Cave. A lot more supervision here than you would. It would be so much fun to go through Timpanogos Cave without a ranger, but that's just not allowed. The place is just too delicate. You can imagine what would happen. If you do go through the park, you will discover that the first cave was pretty much looted of all of its stalagmites and stalactites. That was the first one discovered before it was protected as a national monument. So you now only go through in small groups, and I believe it's closed this year because of the virus. You just can't take groups through there without expecting people to get sick from each other. Okay, in contrast, oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. So here's a quote: "Freedom to be unencumbered by domineering authority and chart one's own course has been identified by some behaviorists as another human need." So this is not a place where you can be free and unencumbered. That's some pretty domineering National Park Service uniform there. Nice guy, by the way. Yeah, here you can see in the ceiling, especially, extremely delicate helictites hanging off the ceiling there. That, yep, in that original cave, it's almost all gone, being unsupervised. In contrast to it, this is Newberry National Monument over in Oregon, and this is a lava tube cave. So lava flowed out of one of the big volcanoes, And as it cooled on the surface, the core of it stayed liquid and kept flowing, and then eventually left a void behind it in some places. And this is an underground lava tunnel that's probably over a mile long, and it has no stalagmites or stalactites, nothing delicate about it. And the Park Service allows you to go in on your own, which is a lot of fun. There are a lot of other people in there, so it's not like you're alone. They just make sure you have at least 3 lights among you and your group, and then they do restrict the number of people that are in there at once. But it's nearly a mile long, so you can be in there quite a ways. So there's a time lapse photo. There are a couple of spots that have staircases, not very many. So yeah, it's mostly the sandy bottom, and you're free to go wandering, taking your time uh, as you wish. And just thinking back to that phrase, to chart one's own course has been identified by some behaviorists as a human need. So whenever possible in your designing a park or a picnic area, as much as you can allow people to chart one's own course, that's great. Okay, just wonderful place. This is the black box of the San Rafael Swell. And climbing gear is a pretty useful thing here. You can do it as a 17-mile long hike, or you can rappel in and just do, the last 7 or 8 miles are the best miles anyway. All right, principle 3, both function and aesthetics must be satisfied. So going back to City Creek Nature Preserve, looking at that facility, for a warehouse of salt, it didn't have to look this nice. But they decided that it had 2 functions, and the other one is a summertime picnic area for group picnics, because they stack quite a few tables in there if you want to bring a group in, and they have parking for probably 15 cars or more. So I think they've done a pretty good job of deciding that they needed a salt location, and they could have done just an ugly corrugated warehouse, but because it is on the edge of a nature preserve, they did a good job. They spent a little extra money for this. Down there on the bottom here, just, you can use a blue tarp, just a blue plastic tarp, or this is a very nice quaternary cut tarp. Both serve the same function, that of keeping the rain off you. We camped a lot with our kids in the Pacific Northwest. It rains a lot. And we got a nice large tarp. People would walk by the campground and tell us they had tarp envy because they thought our tarp was lovely. Form and function. Isn't that wonderful? A kite is traditionally that diamond shape. The amazing things that people have figured out how to make them fly. And I've seen pirate ships with multiple sails. This one's pretty simple, but my kids were young. And yeah, the function is just to fly, but the aesthetics is from creating a more interesting design. So here's another quote. But highest human value, that which is judged in terms of human response, is found in the intangible influences possessed in every tangible object, in a tantalizing view, the role of the swelling topography, the shade of a tree, or the intrigue of a paving pattern. So don't just think about the physical objects and its function. Make them interesting, make them have curved lines and so forth. We're going to run through a bunch here. So here is that salt and picnic area in City Creek. And this didn't have to be a fancy, attractive, nice curves, interesting drinking fountain, but they chose to. And so it is a little bit nicer than so many drinking fountains. Even here, a Forest Service drinking fountain. Look at the handles on that spigot on the left. Just that they went with a nice brass handle with a big wing on it is just a little bit nicer than a regular spigot that you see on the right. Putting some curve in your trail makes it a lot more interesting. especially if it's a curve big enough to not quite see around the corner. You do wonder what's around there. And curved lines are generally more interesting than straight lines. This is over in Mill Creek Canyon now, next canyon to the north. And this is curving into a picnic site on the boardwalk. And you can see they took time to cut the wood into wedges so that they could make a nice curve into those places, into the picnic area, versus a straight piece of boardwalk, which isn't nearly as interesting as these curved areas. Now, here's a beautiful set of curves. This is a small sailboat down from Kodiak, Alaska, and I did hear secondhand from the harbor master why this has been sitting here for so many decades. The harbor master and the owner of the sailboat knew each other, and somehow, the runaway girl's owner brought this in without the harbor master knowing it, and then he refused to pay his harbor fee. And so the harbor fee wouldn't, I mean, the harbor master wouldn't let him take it out. So it's been sitting here as those two, uh, have their little fight. But anyway, it's a beautiful boat, even though it's been there so long. I'm assuming these two guys probably aren't even still alive. I have no idea why this boat's still here, but boy, what a beautiful boat. Okay, this is another Canadian park. And look at these boardwalks, that one on the left. So the person that got the job to put in that staircase clearly was given a fair bit of freedom and had quite a nice aesthetic taste. They shaped the boardwalk. The one on the right is, all the boards are cut the same length. That part's not very interesting. But to get under that tree, they just took a little bit of a notch out. So rather than removing the tree, they just made it so you only have to bend over a little bit. Even a tall adult, those two kids could have walked straight under it. But yeah, just the function here is to have a trail, but to do a trail beautifully, we need more of. Here is a piece of Mill Creek Canyon, and the fisheries biologist wanted to stabilize the bank, and he just lined up all the rocks. That by itself is not terribly interesting. Fortunately, once the Forest Service landscape architect was free to come in and see what happened, he was able to do a few changes and create some pools. He didn't have the time and the money to completely change everything. But a few things, this set of stairs, a nice curving set of slate stairs dropping down to the creek, was one of the things that the landscape architect was able to add. It just makes the place a little bit nicer, a little more aesthetic. And here's a piece of their boardwalk that's beginning to age there in Mill Creek Canyon. With it, you look at that and you go, what is around that corner? Having some curves makes it a little bit more interesting. All right, principle 4, establish a substantial experience. And we're going to have to switch videos to pick up on this one.